Paul Atkin leads the Reachout project for rough sleepers at the back of City Road Methodist Church. I asked Paul, how did this work begin?
We're at the Bible College, and every time we used to go into Birmingham City Centre, we'd just seen a few maybe elderly gentlemen that were drinkers, and they were obviously down and outs. We used to call them down and outs in them days. But that was my experience. But then I met a young lady called Kath from the Vineyard Church who was doing the soup kitchen in town. So she introduced me one evening, and it was a whole different ball game. There was young people, old people, females. It was something I'd never witnessed before.
And so, what did you do then? That's okay. We've all been in the situation where we've seen soup kitchens, but we don't end up running projects.
No, and for me, it was a real eye-opener. I mean, there was one of my favourite stories to tell is, you remember the film The Magnificent Seven?
Yeah.
Well, I met 7 guys down there, and I used to call them Magnificent Seven. So every Thursday night when we used to go down, I always used to hang around with these guys and get to build a relationship with them, and got to know them really, really well. And they would half expect, and they would open up and start talking to me about their life and their issues, really. So it all stemmed from there.
I see. So what happened next?
Yeah, to cut a long story short, I mean, I was going out with these guys on a regular basis on the Thursday night, and then one of the guys had an issue. He wasn't actually homeless, but he was a guy that was obviously very vulnerable, living in a flat in a high-rise block, and he was having problems because he couldn't explain the situation properly because of his slight learning difficulties. But I went to visit him, and I realised that he was having major problems with leakage from his toilets and all kinds of things, and he suffered from epilepsy and was living on the 9th floor, David. So I just wrote a letter to the local authorities just saying, look, I'm trying to support this guy. He's obviously in a very vulnerable position, living in this tower block, suffering from epilepsy. Can somebody come around and see him? And to cut a long story short, they moved him out of there into a ground floor flat with a little garden. And it was just like he said to me, you ought to do this full time.
And so you started doing it full time. And
well, not straight away.
No.
Not straight away.
And this came from your Christian faith, though?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I felt, God tells us to look after the poor and the needy, doesn't he? And the vulnerable. And, I think as a Christian, I like to practice what I preach. Yeah. I don't just say it, I try and put into practice what I believe God's called us to do. And my testimony really revolves around the Good Samaritan. The story of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah, of course, everybody knows it, I hope.
Yeah, most people would know the story of the Good Samaritan. Yeah. Whereas the priest walked by and the other person walked by, but, just to show compassion on those that are in need and are vulnerable. And, that's how God was calling me, I think.
But I come to your centre and I see homeless men mainly come in. Yes. They have a meal and so on. Are you just maintain them in their lifestyle on the street, or are you doing more?
I hope we're doing more, to be honest, and I think we are doing more. When I first started this work, David, and I'm going back 20 odd years, there was only myself and another person going out onto the streets and looking after the poor and the needy in them times, the homeless. Over the last few years, a lot of groups are going out into the city centre, and some are big groups, some are small groups. There's a lot of groups doing it, but we had a real clear word that we would be like the eagles soaring above, and God would bring people our way that we could hopefully turn their lives around. And we've seen many lives turn around through the centre. Even this week, we found that 2 other men who have been homeless on the streets are now moving into flats. In fact, we visited one yesterday, took him a settee round, got a lovely flat. And, it's about giving people hope, isn't it?
You give them hope and you give them an opportunity. Is that the idea?
Absolutely. Yeah. You see, Jesus said, I've come to give life and life in all its fullness.
Okay. Well, let me ask that question then. You give life in fullness, and you are getting people off the streets. Can you ever see a time when you will come to me and the rest of the church and say, David, there are no longer homeless people, rough sleepers in Birmingham. We're going to vacate the premises?
Can I be totally honest? I don't think that will ever happen. I think there's always going to be people in it. I've been doing this now for 20 odd years.
Yeah.
And it fluctuates, you know, the governments, whoever's in, I mean, you know, I don't want to get into a political sort of, but whoever's in government, there's always been an issue around homelessness and the poor and the needy. And the truth is that, you know, there'll always be people in need, always people vulnerable. I mean, the Bible says, doesn't it? You will always have the poor with you. It's how we deal with that.
And the point is how you deal with it, and the way you deal with it is you work with them to get them off the streets, and possibly help to build their lives up in other ways as well.
Absolutely, yeah, totally. To give, you know, the long-term goal is to see them on a more fulfilled life, to come off the street, hopefully to get into work, you know, get back into society. We all deserve that. We all deserve a break.
Well, can I just say, on behalf of everybody at City Road, we're very proud that you've come to be with us, and we see it as part of our Christian witness in the city. And we hope that we give you the support that we can.
Well, David, can I just say that we wouldn't be where we are today without you people.
That's
you know, you gave us a space at the back. You know, there was a bit of. We both know that the journey wasn't easy.
Yeah.
But we're seeing the fruit, and we're seeing, you know, we built up a really good relationship and a bit of a friendship as well.
Amen.
And you know, we've had a few ups and downs along the way, but that's part of relationship. That's how you build it up.
Yeah. We didn't get married, by the way.
No.
And just one final thing, which I don't think a lot of people know about this, but before you started this work, you did spend some time as a professional footballer.
I was on Notts County's books for a short period of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love my football. You know, it was a real passion of mine at one point. In fact, it was probably more passionate than I was for God. Do you know what I mean? But the truth is that, I mean, God put me on a different pathway.
Yep.
You know, I had a bad injury. People were looking to sign me and other kinds of things. But I wouldn't be where I am today without Jesus Christ in my life. I wouldn't be the man I am today without him being the heartbeat of who I am. Do you know what I mean? And I think over the years I've learned, you know, from my childhood and stuff like that, you know, I what I would say to people, don't be put off by what people think about you. It's what God thinks about you that's the most important thing. You know, some people might put you down and say you're not good enough. But the truth is, if you can get the right people behind you and keep going and keep persevering, it's amazing how you can turn your life around. I mean, I was literally rock bottom. At the end of 1996, I was contemplating suicide.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh.
Yeah, and because my marriage had broken up, my first marriage, my sister had died, I'd lost my dad. I got made redundant that year. It couldn't get any worse. But then God turned my life around and he said to me, Paul, I will restore your brokenness so you will see many other people restored. And I think my testimony is that has happened. You know, we have seen that. And the fruit is there for everybody to see.
Paul,
and I think, yeah, you know, and that's the only testimony I can give. That God turned my life around. If he can turn my life around, he can turn everybody's life around.
And that's a really positive point on which to end. Thanks very much, Paul, for all you're doing.
Thank you for joining us online at City Road Methodist Church, Birmingham. If you'd like to know more about us, go to our website www.cityroad.org.uk or find us on Facebook and Twitter.